You got to ask someone, do they want to be an owner operator or a strategic owner? What is the way we're going to get there? And then what do we have to track and what matters most?
Welcome to Builders, Budgets, and Beers. I'm Reece Barnes, and I started this podcast to have real conversations about money in the building industry, the wins, the mistakes, and everything in between. I believe builders deserve to feel confident about their finances, and that starts by hearing from others who've been through it too. This industry can be slow to change, but the right stories and the right tools can make profitability feel possible. Let's get into it. Alrighty, Brad. Mics are hot. We're rolling.
How you doing, Reece?
I'm doing good. Thanks for joining us all the way from up across the border in Canada.
That's right, the Great White North. Although Victoria's about as mild as it gets in Canada.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, it's because we're below the parallel, right? Like it's just, we're still in the tropical zone of northern United States, right? So
yeah, but it's more like Seattle weather, isn't it?
Green,
rainy.
Vancouver and Seattle really really similar, and then we're across the Vancouver Island, so Victoria gets a bit more sun, but it's maybe not as wet as Seattle, but rain. Yeah, we're a rainforest at the end of the day, right? So
it sounds cheerful.
We're very cheerful up here most of the time. I mean, I mean that's the fable that Canadians tell ourselves. I'd say like Americans are more extrovertly friendly. So,
okay.
In my 20s, I was part of a group called the Kindness Crew, and we traveled around the world doing acts of kindness in bizarre, weird ways.
Okay.
From 48. This is a long time ago. It's pre-real estate. And so we film it back when, this can do more than a $20,000 camera that we had, but we got
that weighed 40 pounds.
Yeah. And we'd have a film crew tracking us, and we wrote a couple books and wrote Good Morning America. So we go to New York, and it's way easier to hug a New York construction worker than it is someone in Toronto, for example.
That is hilarious.
Toronto, they'll be like having a briefcase. It's like a football and a bubble. Whereas like you go to New York or most parts of the US and they're like, you want a hug? Forget about it. Like, hey, I'll hug you guys, get off the crane, come down here. So I'd say New York is the friendliest place I'd ever been. So
that's wild. I don't know how many people,
hundreds of thousands of people around the world. I was the hugger. So yeah.
You were the chief hug officer.
I was the chief hug guy. And then, I don't even know if you can sell the book anymore. It might be on Amazon, but it's like Cool to Be Kind. And we really Tom Green meets Mother Teresa. That was us. So we do
hilarious
extreme acts of kindness. And after we all got married and had kids and got away from it, it crops up in weird times. Like we did do a lot of corporate keynote speaking. So like ESPN or Disney or Starbucks or corporations will hire us to come in, like SaaS software.
Yeah, sure.
You do a big keynote Tony Robbins type speech on kindness in the workplace, right? We call it the kindness and
I had no idea.
Yeah. So it's like I remember like it was in San Fran once, and the band we built this city.
Yeah,
was the opener, and then we came in high-fiving 5,000-10,000 people.
Yeah,
so funny. And then we give a little talk about kindness to self, kindness to coworker.
Who said, was that something Starship?
Starship was there. And so we'd have these weird little, like Good Morning America, like we'd have these weird little moments of fame back before social media, and it was hard. So
so if I Googled your name, would this come up? Would there be a picture of you like hugging people and stuff?
Maybe you could like go you could go like Cool to Be Kind on Amazon. Cool to Be Kind Brad Stokes, and it might come up. I mean, there's other kindness crews now though. Like I've been in Toronto or in Vancouver, and I'll walk around a street, and this has happened to me twice, where there's a bunch of people with t-shirts on that say kindness crew, and I'll just give everyone a hug. So there's kindness crews all around the world now. As far as I know, we were the first. So yeah.
Well, that makes a lot of sense with you in like real estate and developing.
Yeah, I mean, there's the total,
like this right there.
You know what it was? I was like 100K in debt in my late 20s, and I was raised by a single mom on minimum wage. I mean, I would be about as poor as you can get in Canada, and I wasn't raised on finance or anything like that. I had background in literature and history, which basically meant I studied rugby at UVic. And
Yeah.
my mom passed away when I was quite young. So it's like I was like, I got to figure out money. So I just started to say yes to jobs in anything to do with learning about finance. And I did my MBA and
Yeah.
worked at TD Waterhouse as an investment advisor. I got all that training. But most of my business mentors for the Kindness Crew stuff, right,
Hmm.
uh, were all real estate developers. And so they're like, get into real estate. And so
Yeah.
I had this little think tank of developer, like guys in their 70s and 80s who I would run deals by. And they would
Yeah.
tell me why I was an idiot. And so you'd learn. And then I worked for, I can't tell the names because there's NDAs, but I've worked for private equity groups. I've probably raised 100 million in private equity. So not no debt. I'm just talking about the equity
Yep.
or any loans or anything or build out
Yep.
or limited partnerships.
Yeah.
So
LP guy.
what's that?
You're an LP
I
guy.
was, yeah, I was like,
Yeah.
and then I realized that, it's, you can have a great deal, but then a bad general partner, or you have a
Yeah.
great general partner with a bad deal and you need both. So I wanted to try it myself. And I did 3 deals with Steve and Dan Cox. So it was CGS Property Group. And then it was Cox Developments. And I'd be on the disclosure statements or part of the general partner, but I wouldn't be necessarily front and center unless things went wrong. And so I did 2 big developments in Victoria downtown, like towers, 18 stories,
Cool.
and then 1 smaller development in Carlsbad, California, in which that I was the actual developer. And those all
Very cool.
collectively took about 12 years because, from buying the land, result, like, Carlsbad was tighter or smaller. But so I went to that journey from the private equity world to actually being a developer and trying not to go bankrupt, and
Dang.
honestly learned like why we were successful was basically first in, first out. So you start to understand, well, why were we able to raise money at a time the sellable per square foot was $500 and tell our investors that in 3 to 4 years condos will sell for $800 a sellable. It was all based on predicting demographic and population growth correctly. So that's how
Okay.
I was trained by guys who just see the trends coming, and then you
Okay.
would see other guys who wouldn't do that, and then worst case scenario they would go bankrupt. Best case scenario for them, they would be able to get out of a bad deal through hard work and sweat. So that's for our clients. My hope is that I can
Interesting.
help them, like, say, listen, let's focus on the basics, demographics,
Yeah.
population growth, and where can we potentially see what a market will do as much as possible. There's always a margin of error. So you
Yep.
can be first in, but also when should you start to pull back? Because real estate is different to construction, which is half of what we do at Highspire, is help our clients run their construction companies better.
Yep.
But unless you're going to jump from market to market, it's not just location, it's timing. And then the
Yes.
access to capital, believe it or not, is the
Well,
actually easy part. So
yeah.
yeah.
So okay, there was a lot in there, and it was really
Yeah,
good.
sorry,
So
that's my background.
that was perfect.
That's
That
it.
was
You
perfect.
got
Okay,
me.
so
Yeah.
we went from
Hugging.
kindness celebrity
Yeah, yeah.
into like inheriting this insane network of just like good luck and happenstance, call it,
Yeah,
of people that were investing
yeah,
and doing developing.
yeah.
And then you were a developer, and now you're at Highspire. Now, for the folks that don't know what Highspire is, give them a little bit on what Highspire is and what your role is, what your focus is. And then
Yeah.
there's a couple pieces that I want to unpack, but we'll start there.
Yeah. So Highspire is a coaching company at the end of the day. First and foremost, there's 2 arms to it. There's we have clients who hire us to help transform their construction company, ideally to something that is more fully optimized, vertically integrated, self-sustaining operation. So basically, it runs more efficiently and creates more time for the owner. Now,
Okay.
that owner may decide that he just wants to work more and create more and more and more. That's great. But we also want him to have more time for health and happiness and his kids, but also to develop real estate because we feel that they're perfectly positioned, construction company openers, to create, relative to the mean, relative to the average human,
Mm-hmm.
they are very optimal for developing real estate if they do it right. Because
Yes.
they understand construction. They're constantly trained in negotiating and solving problems every day.
Mm-hmm.
They understand permitting and entitlement risk because they have to deal with that. So if you can, they understand finance better than a lot of people who come from different backgrounds.
Mm-hmm.
And then market risk, it's kind of the trickiest thing because markets can have really long cycles relative to even the 5-year cycle. There can be,
Sure.
bigger ones. So that's what we want to do. We want people to build wealth through real estate, whether that's just running your construction company better, but also ideally over time buying and holding real estate assets or developing them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Those are our clients.
Well,
So,
and who do you like? What's the low end? What's the high end of who you work with?
oh
Top line
man, I
revenue.
think it's a
Call
real
it.
range. I think you will get clients in some of our groups who are, they are doing 1 to 2 million of revenue a year. They're
So they're early.
really small. They're early.
Yep.
Then you'll have huge companies like doing over 50 million. I don't know if that's huge,
Yeah.
but that would be the bigger than that. But
Yeah.
it is a range. We try to pair our clients in groups, learning pods where they're at a similar level, and
Sure.
we like to pair them in different markets. So
Totally.
competition but it's a really good network. And what attracted me to it, I just finished my development about my last big development, like 206 condos,
Mm-hmm.
during COVID. And I got hired on as provincial government for a period of time to help solve some of the industrial real estate problems for BC Transit. So their transit
Cool.
system. And it was cool because I got to play in industrial, which I'd never developed personally as a developer on.
Yeah.
But definitely hard to transition to the public sector if you've been an entrepreneur your whole life. So it was great,
Yeah.
but I was going to make a transition, and then someone introduced me to Paul, and Paul was good friends with one of my ex business partners for the Kindness Crew, Val Litwin.
Okay.
So I was like, okay, so not a scam, because it looked so good that I was like, can this be real? And
Sure.
I looked at the founders, and I knew of Dave Campbell, very well regarded in Victoria. I didn't know
Okay.
him personally, but then Jordan, also incredible reputation, Jordan Milne, and Jordan
Yeah.
was actually my tenant when I bought my first big development site in downtown.
No way.
Yeah, right after the credit crunch, and we bought this like a great downtown corner site when the
Yeah.
whole market was scared, right?
Okay.
And we got a piece of land probably at like $22 available per square foot because we rezoned it. So once
Okay.
we knew we would get the rezone, it took us about 4 years. But there was an old rundown commercial building that we eventually turned into like 144 rental units.
Wow. Okay.
But it was the first rental building built in one of the first or second built in BC in over 30 years, because the number
Wow.
didn't work for rental for a long time for various reasons. So another
Sure.
long trend, right?
Yeah.
So Jordan was one of my tenants. He was starting GMC projects and he was leasing space from us. So I had known Jordan for a long time. So rarely do you have three of the four founders you had a reference check. And so I'm like, oh, this is really interesting.
Yeah.
So for a couple of years, like I just got to know Paul and saying, what are you doing? I've always wanted to try coaching, but my background is more this. And so they hired me as a coach, but I do have less clients than a lot of our coaches because my big focus over time will be on Highspire Capital, in which we can help advise our clients to, like, how do you raise money for a limited partnership? Or
Totally.
if it's good enough, like we would like a shot at being part of the development or something. So build a framework, how we look at different markets, how we because the real value is this insane group of clients that you've kind of almost vetted in a way.
Yeah.
If the location and timing are correct in that specific market, an
Yeah.
amazing spearhead, general partner, developer for a project. And that's so hard to find. Like, people don't understand how hard that is to vet, because most of the time when I was in private equity, people call me up and 99 times out of 100, I'm like, I would never give that guy money. Like,
Totally.
knocking on your door.
Yeah.
And none of them would ever try to get coaching. That's the filter. None of those guys would ever, if you're at all a narcissist, you're not really into self-improvement. So
totally,
I've been blown away by just how good our clients are. And it's just a question of, obviously, I've only been here about 9 months, and I'm just getting my feet under me, and I've, you've got all this sort of turmoil, but I like turmoil. That usually means there's
Something's cooking.
something's cooking. If you make your money on the buy, so if you can find the markets where it makes sense to buy, you usually win. It's when you try to force a deal.
Yeah.
That's all part of what we want our clients. So yeah.
The more I'm taking away, Brad, it kind of seems like you're, the old guy, the 70, 80-year-old soul that's now
I've been doing it for almost 20 years, and I am literally like the cheerful contrarian.
The cheerful. It keeps coming up.
It was really hard in the public sector when people are like, "We're going to spend $500 million on this transit center," and I'm like, "It's a garage."
It's a garage.
I don't think you have that money anymore. It's like you see the end coming, you see the trends coming, and so I think the key is really simplifying. And I know, like you guys use AI really well. I think Adaptive does that better than most. One thing for me, which has been really interesting, just playing around with things like Claude and all that sort of stuff, is I can run really complex urban land economic models. Like you could dust off a book like this, like urban real estate economics 300 or 400, and I can do this and do this, and I can create this really complex model.
Yeah,
I never would have the time before, because it'd take me a year or two to go and get that data from the census and stuff. So
sure,
you do that in half an hour. What's interesting is I'll start with demographics and population growth, and it's uncanny how close I get to reality when I work with if I have a guy in Utah and I'm like, pick the top 2 spots in Utah, and he does, and I run it through a simple model, it throws those 2 cities, small towns at me. So that's the more complex I get, the farther away from truth I get. So
okay, wait. So explain that.
That's the key. It's like it's simplifying how you look at real estate, right?
Okay.
And that's what I want us to do. Is like, we want to be studies of like philosophers and streetwise economists of population. Why are people moving to an area, and why are people staying in an area and aging into real estate consumption?
That was, I'm glad you brought that up again, because that was one thing I wanted to dig into. It sounds so simple.
It's so simple.
It's like follow the growth
all the time. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And then you're like, okay, well, if it's that easy, then who can be a developer? You mentioned Utah. Denver's an interesting market. Have you ever looked much into
Denver?
Yeah, dude, Rado.
Yeah, I mean, it didn't rate high for me right now, right?
But I mean,
parts of Denver are interesting.
Yeah.
Right? Like there's other areas of Denver. It would be one I'd be watching right now to see like what are the foreclosures and what's the buildable cost per square foot. I would be more interested in like, why are people moving to that area? Right?
Yeah.
And the guys I think get it the best right would be 2 I've met, Ryan and Drew, a Blue Truck Group. They've keyed into, I think, in a sub market that is really really key. I don't know how much I could share, but I mean,
you don't have to.
Yeah, but I mean, what I would be looking for in the area is who's moving, because I think Denver went through a period. I could be wrong. I've only looked at it briefly, right?
Yep.
But I looked at Denver and I said, okay, well, how many people moved there during COVID? And then is there a bit of is there going to be a period of time where you might, in some parts of Denver, see a decrease?
They stop moving there.
Right. Or just like a static period.
Yep.
And then also, did they overbuild in certain areas? But then who is moving there? So if millennials are going there and they're looking for single family homes, what's fascinating to me about it is people are more than willing to drive an hour if they can buy a home at 30 acres.
Yeah.
Versus like, say, Victoria here, our burden on driving is very low. So if you drive 10 minutes out of downtown and you try to build a condo development, you're going to lose money if you think you're going to get the same price rent per square foot or sellable per square foot as downtown. And it's only a 10-minute drive that if Toronto would not make an impact. So you have to understand, when you're looking at a certain market, is what's the value that area that people put on their time for driving, commuting. That's different.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And that's where
understanding the demographics and the culture of the area. And that's why you need a local, because my model will tell me one thing and then they're like, yeah, but you didn't think of that. So
And that's where like the contractors are poised so well to add in development because they're like one of the businesses that they're more or less handcuffed into their market,
yeah, and
right? Like they
Denver's
can't.
interesting too because it's a blue state and there's more regulatory burden on average in blue states. I think they're a blue state, aren't they? Like Denver,
Yeah,
like yeah.
yeah,
So
yeah.
so like they
Purple.
say,
I
hey,
think maybe
it
technically
should be
purple.
easy to build purple. I love that. It
Yeah,
should be easy to build in there given the space you have, but there are regulatory issues that make the supply curve inelastic, right? So it won't
yeah,
respond to demand as quickly as maybe like a red state, or I'll use Alberta, Edmonton. It just responds so quickly that homes tend to be cheaper over time
yeah.
because supply keeps up with demand. That's an area, if the burden of entry is high, given regulatory reasons, then sometimes if you time it right, then you get in on a great piece of land. And Victoria would probably be where I'm from,
Yeah.
be a lot like developing in California or Portland, or it'd be excessively anti-development. So if you can bridge that through your local contacts and whatnot, then you can do very well if you get the best piece of land at the right time. And
Interesting.
yeah, so
Okay, now
sorry, I'm
this
all
might
over the
be
map. I'm having too much.
no, this is good. I think I one question that's coming up is like I don't necessarily see a correlation between. I mean, we talked a little about like who you guys work with. Like
Mm.
you've got your guys that are early in their journeys, 1 to 2 million, call it in top line. You got your guys that are doing over 50 million, 100 million. You guys have a couple over 100 million clients
Yeah,
if I'm not mistaken.
I think so. Yeah.
And I think like I don't necessarily see a consistency or a correlation between the size of the top line revenue and the success of the business or the health of the business. And what I mean by that is like you could have a $50 million a year guy that still struggles to track costs and like really know where they're at. And like then feeling comfortable and confident to go down that development path, right? They might be like, just lack of better terms, like they brag about their top line revenue, right? It's like you go to a country club and all the business owners love talking about their top line revenue, right? But then it's like, so what do you think is like absolutely fundamental, absolutely critical for a contractor, whether it's residential, commercial, whatever it might be, to position themselves to take advantage of developing opportunities? Like, what would you see that journey and that path being?
Yeah, I think you nailed it. Where it's if people are always just talking about their top line, um, that could be a red alert. Especially like real estate develops the same way. If there's a guy who's always at the golf country club and bragging about this or that, and his deals just don't make sense, and
Yeah,
how's that working? Well, they inevitably go bankrupt, or they bankrupt a bunch of people and they move towns, right? Sadly.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
so construction guys, I think sometimes they fall in love with the work, and then uh they're like, yeah, work at all costs, like top line, top line, top line. But I if I'm looking, I'm always looking for who runs the tightest ship. And if a guy
okay,
runs $2 million in sales but has huge margins,
mm-hmm.
a really tight business model, and has created a lot of time for him, like he can scale it, he can step away, go on vacation. He's not like getting up at 4 in the morning and going to bed at midnight. Like
Yeah,
that to me is someone I'm more likely to want to give money to develop something, because I know he has time to think, solve
mm-hmm.
problems, and and you're focusing on the 80-20 rule. Like where's their time spent, and can they create a company that allows them to spend time on things that would actually make them the most money, like would move the dials. Because the way I was taught is don't just get into development for the sake of development. Understand the difference between something that has high margins, big return on cost, um, and there always are going to be problems. Every day there's a problem to solve as a real estate developer or owning a construction company.
Mm-hmm.
But the better you build your strategy. So in construction companies, it's your strategic plan, and
Mm-hmm.
development, it's more, I would say, like an economic strategic plan. It's like
Yeah,
what's coming, but at the end of the day, it's a strategic plan.
okay,
Like, this is where I'm going. This is how I'm going to get there, and these are
yep,
the steps I have to take. And then the number one issue I'd say for our and sometimes it's our biggest guys, because they're so good, but they really need to hire a COO,
yeah,
and it's so hard for them to do that. And every time they do that and they get the right guy, it's like their whole life has changed. and you can do
Like for the better.
for the better. Like
Yeah.
they're younger, they're fitter, they're less stressed out, and they have time to think and work on the business. Who's the guy who does this best out of Kansas City, one of our clients? But I would say he's one of the biggest success stories. Like he was
Okay.
80 hours a week, go, go, go. Was it Steven? Steven. Yeah.
It
And
could be.
Steven, yeah, I think you might have like
I might have met Steven. If you
I'll,
name the name of the company, we could
I'll
figure it out.
find it in a second. Anyways, like I would say he is like a good class example where Paul was his coach. We had one of the best coaches. I think Paul Atherton, our CEO, is probably the best coach I've ever met.
Yeah.
For this area.
Mm-hmm.
And Steven, his client, one of Highspire's clients, was working so much in the business, just never seeing his kids, not having dinner with his family.
Yeah.
And so he focused on scaling his company. It's like, who do I have to hire? And it was really hard to believe that hiring this person wouldn't be at a huge cost. But at the end of the day, it freed up his time to work on things that would make him more money. For him, that was real estate investment. So buying commercial properties and building wealth through real estate. So not only is he incredibly more wealthy now, as long as he doesn't overextend, he will be incredibly way more wealthy in 10 years. And he has way more time. He eats dinner with his kids every evening. So I think that in a nutshell is what you want to achieve. Whether you make 2 million top revenue or 50 is irrelevant to me. It's like, how do you want to design your life and what do you want your week to look like? And
that's what I want to dig on, because like that is, someone would listen to that last, couple minutes and would be like, that's what I want. Right. Like I'd be hard. There's not many people out there that would say they don't want
you need a few guys who are like, I just love to work 80 hours a week and I don't want kids and I don't want a dog.
They probably need therapy more than coaching.
Maybe.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
That too. Yeah.
But it's like, what is like, and I obviously know like you guys offer the service, but what would you say are like some of the more tactical things, regardless of top line revenue, that these contractors can do? And I mean, you mentioned the 80-20 rule. Like I know the 80-20 rule as in 80% of the work gets done by 20% of the people.
Yeah.
But like, what do you like? Give me some more depth on that, a little bit more. Like, if you're talking to someone, what would you poise them to do?
Yeah, like I think like context is king.
Of course, we could run a scenario.
Universal rules are for fools, but there are some universal rules that, on average, do the best thing, right? So I always say, like, I like to look at someone's org chart first and foremost. Like there are the things we do first, and we look at their financials and we get a sense of where they're at. But I always get a sense, like, do you have really punchy job descriptions with, this is your job description, this is your job deliverable for the person, and this is your KPI. That's like the success metric. It might be your gross revenue. It might be like how for a product manager, how is their gross profit per week, actuals versus what you budgeted, things like that. So there are things you can track. I think when you like, adaptive is a great tool because it allows them to understand their financials sooner, faster, and easier, right?
Yeah.
So you start to see where you're trending, and then if you're for the the most important KPIs and job deliverables are the CEO. So we want him focusing on the big things.
Yep.
And we want him to have a dashboard that is up to date as quickly as possible.
Totally.
He knows that certain jobs are losing money. If the gross profit per week is going down, then he can ask questions and say, well, why? Why are we trending this way? What's going on?
Yes.
Also, a real simple meeting situation where you have every week certain guys come to you with management summary reports, and they're just 20 minutes long, and they prep for the report and they just go over KPIs, boom, 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 boom. Right.
Yep.
And then, so we're trying to, so things like that. The most main thing though is like, put a value on your time as the owner, and then see where you're spending your time, and then reverse engineer it. Would you pay yourself that much? Would you hire someone and pay them what you're paying yourself to do that job?
Yes.
And then we can sort of see like how much money that if you're kind of spending over 100K a year on doing a certain activity where you could hire someone for half that, well, then that's a signal to hire or improve your systems.
Yes.
but yeah, but I always remember the first time I met you, and I saw Adaptive, and then I talked to a lot of our clients who came to us through you, and just how much time you guys saved them.
Mm-hmm.
That was everything. Like, and that's the exciting moment we are in this area of industry, because we AI is not going to take your ability to lift a hammer or do things or interact
Right.
core part of your business, but it sure will allow you to understand your business faster,
Totally.
in my opinion.
What's up, everybody? Quick interruption before we get back into it. If you're a contractor who wants to walk away with an extra $20,000 in your pocket for 1 hour of your time, listen up. On June 30th, we are partnering with Paul Atherton and the team at Highspire for a live webinar, and we're calling it exactly what it is: how to increase net profit. This is no fluff, no sales pitch disguised as a webinar. Paul is going to hand you the actual levers. Overhead you're hemorrhaging right now without knowing it, how gross profit per week tracking can move you from 10% to 15% net margin, and how to stop letting schedule creep quietly kill your projects. Contractors who have implemented this stuff have saved upwards of $300,000 on their bottom line. One guy knocked 46K off his overhead in a single week. So register now. The link's going to be in the show notes. June 30th, 9 a.m. Pacific time. Don't miss it. We're like in this conversation now to where it's like, sure, hiring people, like you need to hire people, but now we're like in the age of like AI and agentic AI actually performing tasks at like a high enough quality to where it's not just, can I hire somebody, but should I go down the solution path?
Mm-hmm.
Right. But the one piece I wanted to touch on, just to bring this back, because I was literally I was with a contractor, built and ran over $100 million company. And he's like a business builder to his
Right.
core. Right. And he's the guy that's like wants to be in the weeds, and he's forgotten more than most people will ever learn type of guy. But like, I think about that of like, how do you start to get someone like that to see, I need to hire this person to remove myself from this part of the game? Like, is it really just like a wake up in the morning type of thing and sit down and evaluate your day? Is it an exercise where you look at your calendar? Is it
Yeah.
I write down what I do every minute? Or like if I'm on a task for 30 minutes and I say I spent this much time doing it, like how do you get to that point
Yeah,
of
how I
realization?
get, I mean, there are best rules to do it. Like and a best way to do it is you track your time, right?
Yeah.
To the hour, and say like, where did you spend your time? I find that for some of our clients, it's very hard to get them to track their time. So
Yeah.
I'm like, great, give me an estimate, like walk me through it. Show me your calendar. Where do you block time? Like,
Yeah.
definitely want to use a calendar to block time, block spare time. I like to get people to front load their week. Sooner is better than later for me, better
Yeah.
than later. And
Yeah.
you lose a day, you lose a week, you lose a month, you lose a year.
Yeah.
But the main way to get someone to run their business better, I find, is there's a why attached, a real why they need to create more time.
Mm-hmm.
They're running on desire, determination, drive, and they burn out, right?
Yeah.
Or they go through a divorce.
Yep.
They have a health issue, right?
Yep.
Like I had a health issue, and that's why I stepped away from real estate development for a while. Like you
Yeah.
just, you're in China going to 20 different cities in 3 weeks, and you're looking at, like, it's just,
Wait, is that what you did?
yeah, that's one, like, because you're always problem solving, like, oh,
Yeah.
we're gonna save $5 million. Okay, I guess Brad's gonna figure out how to. We're gonna see what you have to do to import stuff, right?
Yeah.
So, or like one of my partners at one point, we were late on. We're the window company we were using out of Thailand, I think it was, for one project, was late. And so Steve Cox, I think he's in his 70s, went to Thailand because I couldn't. I was having a baby.
Yeah.
His son Dan couldn't. So Steve goes. Steve had to have heart surgery while he was there in Thailand.
There.
Yeah, minor heart surgery, but still heart surgery.
Yeah.
Minor heart surgery.
Yeah.
And then 2 days later, he's back in the factory, just kind of standing there like this old developer guy who just stink guy. And so like sometimes that's what it takes to not go bankrupt. Like, COVID hits, things
Wild.
happens. But at the end of the day, like we want to plan around that. And if we had coaching, I'm sure we could have prevented some of that. I mean, development's like on a project that big, the way we did it. Sometimes life happens.
Yeah.
What I want to do is I want to make your business as efficient as possible so you have time when life happens, when it hits you in the face, you have energy and the
Yep.
ability to deal with it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So going going to China or Thailand to me is definitely a CO activity. You need that
Yeah.
skin in the game. You need to be on the disclosure statement or the general partner. But doing like running your sales processes or picking up a hammer or doing your bookkeeping, that is something you can hire for at some point. The key is like, how do we get people doing certain tasks so you have time? Sometimes it's just thinking time. Like, what's that book, The Road Less Stupid? And
Okay.
you ever
Yeah.
listen
It's
to
like a
that?
Ron White story.
It's something like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Like it's
Yeah.
the narrator is great. He sounds like a very grumpy old man.
Yeah.
And he's like, no, go after every chapter. Go and think. You'll thank me for it. And it's like he just says great thinking time. And that resonated with me because that's what I was always told. You just need to go think.
Yeah.
And your best ideas, like the best big ideas come when you have time to think. Okay.
Yes.
Like owners need time to read some of these books and
Yeah.
think about them. I've been reading this book for 20 years and I still hardly understand it. Like it's a
Secret. What is that?
Secrets
Secrets
of
of
the
the Temple.
Temple, how the Federal Reserve runs the country. And you kind of like are, it's one of the best ways to understand, and it's imperfect to a certain degree, but you're trying to understand cycles, like how credit, the Fed can impact the cycle of credit availability, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, you can service your debt, but if you get the timing wrong at some point, and this is a big trend, like we saw it in the 80s, right? Where they're like, we need to
Okay.
get inflation under check.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden your debt matures and no one else will refinance you, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Sure.
Just rates go to 18. So I mean, I'm saying that's going to happen, but I'm just saying like understanding why it happened is an insight that I think every real estate developer should have time to meditate on.
Totally. And
And
you can't get that time if you don't have the business in place that can run
yeah,
itself.
you don't hire someone to go and meditate on that kind of stuff. Like
Right.
there's things you hire people for, and then there's things that I believe only an owner should be doing to a certain extent if he's in an owner of real estate development. So yeah,
Totally.
yeah,
And then from there, like in order to get to the business that is like self-sustaining or running healthier,
yeah.
you need the strong why. Do I want more time to meditate so that I can grow this thing?
Or do you want to be stressed out all the time and working till 1 a.m. on your books, and
Yeah.
or do you want a really poor sales and marketing funnel and
Yeah.
and not understand how you can build up your pipeline?
Yeah.
And you also you need a real strong marketing and sales and operation. They all have to integrate, right? You need to be able to capture market wind, and you need to have a strong operational side where you can build efficiently, right? And you need to go
Yeah.
back and forth and sort of put your finger on each pulse. But you also need to have time to see when it might change. So like marketing is interesting, where people used to Google, how do
Yeah.
you Google? And now we're seeing a lot of people are using their AI to find our
How do you win GPT? Yeah.
yeah. So that's going to be a pivot on how you change your marketing strategy. And you need time to be there first to see
Yeah.
it coming. Because if you're so lost in the business, you might be a year behind that moment. And that doesn't happen all the time, but like the world's like that. It gives you moments, right? And
Of course.
you have to have time to see it coming,
Of course.
Yeah. So
What
that's what a well-run business gives you. It allows guys to work on the business, to strategize, to think. That's what strategy is. A good strategy.
yes.
Yeah.
What do you think is the number one thing that keeps business owners from doing that? I know we talk about the why,
Dopamine.
but and
It's their brain. I would say a lot of entrepreneurs have some form of attention deficit. I do.
yeah.
A great book is called Scattered Minds. It's up there somewhere.
Is that the one with the leaf?
What's that?
Is that the one with the leaf
Let me-
behind you? Is that a
let me-
leaf? The top middle?
Oh yeah, this is it. Yeah. No, it's up
Yeah.
there. So Scattered Minds by let's see, there you go. Yeah.
Gaber Mate?
Yeah. And so my wife got this for me, was in the last year. And for years we've been having this argument. that I don't have attention deficit, because I'd be like, I can hyper focus, I can get shit done. Sorry,
No, you're good.
stuff
You're good.
done, edit.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, and I've done all these things, so I don't get it. I'm,
yeah.
and then I open up the first chapter, and the guy wrote it like he's a surgeon, and
Okay.
he describes himself in university. I'm like, okay, I have attention deficit disorder.
Yeah, yeah,
And so it's all about like, um, like one way I describe a lot of our clients, if we're all Vikings, they're people I want on the boat with me.
yeah, yeah.
Right?
Totally.
They're self-sufficient. They solve problems. My dad was ex-British SAS, and so is my
Okay.
father. And so I would send them behind enemy lines, and they would just mess stuff up and
Yeah,
think on their feet.
yeah,
And so I find construction company owners, they're the special forces of business.
yeah,
It's dynamic. There's variables. They can think on their feet. They're warriors, and I think their brains just are. They're great at contextualizing things naturally, and they love when you have a scattered mind, you like dopamine hits.
yeah,
Right? You're looking for that boom, boom, boom.
yeah,
So what you tend to like is like when you're growing your business and you're starting it, you're involved in everything. It's dynamic. You're boom, boom, energy, desire, drive, determination, boom, boom, boom. But eventually
yeah,
you burn out because it gets so big, right? And
yeah,
so, and even if it's not getting that big, it gets big enough. Like, you have 3 employees and you have enough clients, and you're like, okay, I'm missing things because we don't have the system and I can't do it. And so are you might be hardwired up here just to lean in and work harder because that gives you joy. You feel like you've worked hard, you know,
sure.
and it's very hard to get that dopamine hit to sit and think.
Yeah,
And we tend to procrastinate that type of work. We tend to want our brains procrastinate. So some of our clients, a few I would say, are not like this. They are very analytical. They may have an engineering background. They are linear thinkers, and they are very good at putting in systems and processes and stuff, right?
yeah,
Their weakness might be they don't use the right hemisphere of the brain naturally, and they don't contextualize enough. So they get kind of lost in the details a little bit because that's their dopamine hit. So I'm always
sure,
zeroing in on trying to make assumptions on how someone's brain might naturally work and where do they get that rush, right? Where do they
sure.
get that joy? And but then also, where do they get frustrated? Where do
Yeah,
they get flooded? Where do they get overwhelmed? Where do they forget things?
yeah,
Where are you making hot decisions, hot takes?
yeah,
Where are you overpowering people when they're trying to give you advice?
yeah.
Yeah, these are.
And that's the stuff that you coach them on.
Yeah. I mean, that's how I approach it. I approach, I coach very honestly the way I was coached.
Yeah, yeah,
One of my coaches was a developer, but an Ayurvedic doctor. Like he would take your pulse. He would describe what type of personality you'd have. It was quite interesting.
yeah, sure.
He studied in India,
Yeah,
and he would tell me I'm prone to this, this, and this. And he just met me, and I'm like, okay, kind of creepy. I'm like, is there a crystal ball? But
yeah, yeah,
but then he would give me hard truths and say, well, Brad, you could do this, this, and this. Or I would be like, yeah, these guys just bullied me out of a big deal, and those guys are jerks. And he's like, well, what did you do or not do? And then he would just lay it out for me. And I'm like, okay, like so
damn.
as soon as you're willing to listen to hard truths, you're ready to be coached. Now, saying that, like, coaches aren't always going to get it right, so it's a sort of a mutual self-discovery process, right? but
Sure.
but but you have that discovery process, and then then people admit that this is what they have to do, and then the hard part is, did you do it? Did you do it?
Exactly.
And the cool thing about things like adaptive, or like like Claude is another tool where it's like I said, there's no reason why you can't go and do this now. Like,
Yeah.
here's the trade-off: you spend this much money, it saves you this much time, and you can go do it.
Yes.
Right? Adaptive will do this, this, and this, and this. You don't have to hire this person, and now you're creating this much time. Or even a simple thing is like, hey, build me an org chart and attach job descriptions to them and KPIs. Well, what's this? I'm like, we can do it in half an hour, a rough
Yeah.
draft, and it can be like, you can create interactive dashboards. So what I want people to do is not get distracted and go down this massive distraction phase of using new tools, but saying, okay, this is what it does for me. This is how I track success, and then on to the next one, and And now, so
Totally.
almost,
That's actually
yeah. So that's why I'm,
that's really sound advice.
yeah.
I was just talking about this with another contractor,
Right.
and he spelled it out exactly like that. There's so many tools, there's
Yeah.
so many new things, software, technology, services all changing so fast. Where do you start? And I just told him, I was like, you just need to set back in your day and identify the areas that you're spending the most time and start your search on the software, service, solution, whatever
Yeah.
that's going to get rid of that roadblock.
Yeah.
And like that's, I mean, we have this conversation all the time with Adaptive, right? We're financial ops, right? We don't have
Yeah.
project management.
Yeah.
And there's all these tools out there, and they're like, well, we want it all in one. We want the project management side. And it's like, okay, well, are you do you have an operations problem or do you have a money tracking problem? Right. And you could have both, but then prioritize them. And it's like, what are you actually trying to solve and where are you trying to go after that? And it's like with these contractors that are doing $5 million in top line. And they're like, we want to scale. And it's like, well, yeah, but you don't know your numbers. It was like, do you think Apple went out and was building 1 billion iPhones a year before they knew they would make money on them? Or did they find out how they were going to make money on them and then start building? Right.
Yeah.
So it's like those similar concepts of like having that self-reflection.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, yeah, you got to ask someone, do they want to be an owner operator or a strategic owner?
Yeah.
I think they have to make that decision. And then you got to think like, what is the way we're going to get there?
Yeah.
And then what do we have to track and what matters most? Right.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, it sounds so easy, but it just takes a bit of coaching, I think,
Yeah.
at least for a period of time. And then you need strong metrics on, did this coaching create time for me? And then what am I doing with that time? Right.
Totally.
Or am I constantly getting pulled back into the dopamine hit?
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
Brad, this was a killer episode, dude.
Thanks. What else? I had a few questions for you.
Yeah, let's hear it. Rip it.
Like I'm a big fan of Adaptive, but I always like, I want to improve my ability to talk about it. And what I like about it is I'm not a linear thinker. I hate like, this is just how I use this for this. And I have project management and I have financials. I love how you guys are integrating that story.
Yep.
So what are some key things like I can pass on to my clients who haven't discovered you guys yet? So because I have a lot of clients who use you, but obviously you're not everywhere in Canada. That's most of our clients from the US. And but like, talk to me about that, bridging the financial analysis from the project management. Just a little bit.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I'll right now, like historically, Adaptive was a financial ops platform for construction accounting. Okay. So that was your AP expense tracking, your cost tracking, your income tracking, your accounts receivable, and then your budgeting, WIP reporting, and all the ancillary stuff that goes around that with vendor compliance, payments, lien waivers, stuff like that. Now, because we have that platform, we are building agents specifically for construction accounting workflows.
Well,
okay. So we have an AP expense agent. We have a billing agent. We have a WIP agent. We have a field context agent, right? And essentially what those agents are doing is we'll have clients that come in and they'll say, or prospects rather, and they'll say, hey, we hear all this stuff about AI, but we want to get a partner in to actually help us embed this in a meaningful way to our back office tasks. Okay. So what we'll do now is we'll go through a scoping process to understand what their data looks like first and foremost, because that's a big part of agents, right? And the success of those agents. But then we can build these custom agents to start performing those tasks. So think of it this way. Because we're already ingesting all of their cost, because we're ingesting all their income, because we're connected to their inbox, because, context is getting funneled into the product, now we can build an agent that on a weekly basis will automatically call all the project managers and ask them a set list of questions that somebody would already be wanting on a weekly basis, call it. The project manager answers those questions over the phone. It's transcribed. It's in Adaptive. And then that agent takes that context and starts performing actions.
Perfect.
Okay. An example like a WIP analyst, right? Yeah. You can have a weekly WIP analyst agent running in Adaptive, and it's going to be gathering all this context. And it's like, hey, we see that this project is underbilled by $1.2 million. We saw you were going back and forth with this client on $800,000 change order, but it looks like we haven't, X, Y, and Z with the remaining X number. What do you want us to do with this? And I'm like, oh, great point. I need to get that change order built. I haven't yet, but we have specs from this project that'll be about the same. If you get the rough draft built, I'll come in and tweak it and send it. Oh, and by the way, we had a delay on this, so we're actually going to hold payment on that $200,000. And then the agent is updating payment dates. It's going through and it's building change orders and it's getting invoicing put together with all the costs. So then it's just a send once the user approves it.
I would love to, like, over time, like if you guys one day would see trends in account receivables like extending, and that would be a leading indicator in a market slowing down. And
you could literally, you could
like,
jump in.
It's just my mind just, I
Well,
just know what you guys do. Yeah.
And that's where, like with our AI assistant, right, is like we've got the agents and then we've got the brain.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like we've got all this data. So you could literally bop into one, if you wanted to see, Brad, you could bop into one of your clients' adaptive accounts, go to the AI assistant, and just like a GPT, be like, I want you to take the trailing 36 months of billings on these types of projects and tell me what's going to happen in the future. And it'll like pull all that data and it'll push out a response. You'd obviously want to validate it, right? But you could start running, because we have all that information, all that data. That's where we can start running agents. We can run large language models, right? We can do all those different things.
Right.
So,
all right, man, this was so cool. Thank you. I hope it was fun. I know we kind of jumped around a lot today, but it's always
a good conversation with the cheerful Brad Stokes.
Yeah, it's you're the bromance I've been waiting my whole life for, Reece.
Yeah, that's right.
That's not to make it weird.
Hey, no, you're Canadian. It's okay.
I know.
It's okay. Yeah, you're a hugger. You're a hugger.
I'm a hugger, man.
It's like when you have the context, it's not a weird comment.
Exactly. You know? That's what I did, you know?
Yeah.
So good luck. I know what you're up to. We're heading to our June conference in Alberta.
Yeah.
What are you doing? What's coming up for you guys?
We're actually kind of quiet when it comes to like conferences, trade shows up until like August. We're really involved with CFMA, which is the Construction Financial Management Association. Yeah. And we're going to be hitting a ton of their regional conferences. So we're kind of gearing up for that. But yeah, I mean, I'm always on the fly. I'm always, up for something. So we'll get together at some point.
Looking forward.
But yeah, like I said, it's always great having you on, Brad. We'll be in touch, dude.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Appreciate you. Take care.
You bet.
Bye-bye.
See ya.